Once upon a time, there existed a god by the name of Balor. Balor was a good god, or so he said, and he did do some good things. But naturally, Balor had to punish humans from time to time, sometimes bringing diseases and famine upon them, or ripping pregnant women open, or killing both adults and babies. Normal good acts that gods do. It was important that the people learn their lesson, when they upset Balor in any way. After all, he was a god, and he got to have whatever he wanted, even if he had to commit heinous acts to get it. You Christians especially can understand that, I know. Anyway, Balor had a special group of people whom he paid particular attention to. Yes, all the other humans were created by him, and he owed them protection and love, but he either didn't have the ability or the desire to take care of everybody. So one little group of people in one little area of the world were his special pets. He was willing to ignore everybody else and even treat everybody else horribly in order to take care of his special people, who were called Hayhays. The Hayhays could have lived in many places on the earth, but Balor liked the lands that others occupied. It wasn't great land, but Balor was unaware that in the many years he spent guiding, or misguiding, the Hayhays into the land he was stealing from others for him, there was much better land that the Hayhays could have been given. It was free land where nobody lived. But as I said, Balor didn't know it existed, so neither did the Hayhays. And as you can imagine, the Hayhays were willing to do whatever it took to get the land Balor was offering. What else could they do? If they didn't kowtow to his every whim, even if it meant they must treat other humans, cruelly, themselves, then Balor would treat them cruelly as well, even to the point of killing them or their children. It wasn't easy to obey Balor either. It's not like the Hayhays could just walk into the foreign lands and set up camp and thrive. As I said, other people own those lands. And they weren't exactly excited about giving up their home to invading immigrants. I mean, who would be? Certainly not you Christians, am I right? You don't want foreigners coming in and taking your homes and your jobs. I know that for sure. Balor had rules about how these invasions were to go. His so-called gifts always came with instructions and commandments that had to be followed to the letter. Otherwise, he became irate and threw a conniption fit. Then it was hard telling what would happen. Balor might kill a bunch of the Hayhays or abandon them to their enemies, and they'd have no land of their own at all. In fact, they might cease to exist as a people. I mean, Balor had certainly threatened to make that happen. Well, one time, Balor told the Hayhays he wanted them to go into a land that he was not offering them as an inheritance, but they could have the land under certain circumstances. Balor told the Hayhays to march into various occupied cities, and those cities would belong to them if everything went well. Balor must have been in a good mood that day. Anyway, he told the Hayhays not to take the land outright. They were instead to offer the people peace. That was a nice change. I mean, certainly better than attacking the natives and killing them as, Balor sometimes commanded. This land the Hayhays were going to was called America, specifically the United States of America. Balor had decided to shake things up a bit there. Unfortunately, this offer of peace to the Americans wasn't as good as it sounded. Balor sent the Hayhays with instructions that were quite harmful to the Americans. Here's what he said. When you march into a city in the United States, if the Americans open up their borders to you, you offer peace to them. And if the Americans accept, then they will become your slaves. You can force them to work for you. Now, that was great for the Hayhays, but not so great for the Americans, of course. They owned the land. They'd lived there for centuries. And they definitely didn't want illegal aliens to come in and take over the way their own European ancestors had done to the natives of America. And especially if these immigrants were going to make slaves of the American citizens. Also, the aliens might kill and eat their cats and dogs. You know how crazy illegal aliens are. But this wasn't the worst of it. No, it was far worse than this for the Americans. If they refused to open their borders and become slaves of the Hayhays, Baylor commanded the Hayhays to lay siege to any city that refused, engaging the Americans living there in battle. Baylor told the Hayhays to put to the sword all the men in the cities that wouldn't cooperate and become slaves of the Hayhays. Now remember, the Americans were children of the god Balor, just the same as the Hayhays were. He just didn't care about them. He cared only for the Hayhays. But at least the Hayhays were to murder only the men in the American cities. So that was something, right? A lot better than what Balor, sometimes commanded. And what was to be done to the American women and children? Well, they, along with the livestock and cats and dogs, were to be considered as part of the plunder the Hayhays would enjoy. I guess they'd eat the cats and dogs and rape the women and, put the children to work. This was only the case for countries like America, though. Countries that were far away. Countries that were nearby with cities Baylor planned to give to the Hayhays were to be treated differently. If Baylor was giving cities to the Hayhays as an inheritance, the Hayhays weren't to keep alive the women, children, and lower animals. Instead, they were to destroy everything that had breath. They weren't to destroy the trees, though. Now, Baylor pointed out to the Hayhays, in case they didn't know, that trees aren't people, so the trees didn't need to be killed. He said if they needed some trees to build bulwarks against the city until it fell, well, they could chop them down. But they were to keep the fruit trees alive so they could eat the fruit. Well, that makes sense. Well, that's the story. I'm sure you Christians love it. It's certainly fine and dandy for a God to make this happen. I know y'all understand that Baylor, as a god, had every right to command this invasion and torture and murder of American citizens. You agree that this is good. I know you do. Because, well, this is exactly what your God commanded of his special people. Read it for yourself in Deuteronomy 20:10-20. Or do you think only certain people, like the Israelites, have a right to murder at will? Is that what you think? And do you think that only certain people, like Americans, shouldn't be treated despicably the way others should be? The Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, who were the peoples this passage refers to, who were the people being murdered or turned into slaves. Is it okay to murder and enslave those people but not you? Is that what you think? Really? Really? All righty then. Oh, before somebody cries, you just don't understand how evil those people were. They were sacrificing children. Just let me remind you, so were the Israelites, my friends, so were the Israelites. Besides, sometimes Yahweh told the Israelites not to keep the children alive, but to murder them along with the adults. So what was Yahweh saying then? These awful people are murdering babies. Y'all go murder those precious babies before they can do it themselves. They're sacrificing babies to other gods. Babies can be murdered only as a sacrifice to me. Yes, Christians, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but if you murder a child at the command of your God, you sacrifice that child to your God. You took the child's life in order to appease your angry God. You committed child sacrifice. And yeah, I know you don't do that, but you approve of it. So it's the same thing. Not to mention the fact that you'll turn your back on your own children, your own flesh and blood, if you think your God wants it. So in a way, you do sacrifice children, your own. But hey, it's quite godly to sacrifice your son. I mean, that's the noblest gesture of all. I know you Christians believe and understand that because, well, it benefits you. And like your God, you approve of evil when it benefits you. You're given a get out of hell free card, and that's all that matters to you. Thank you all. Bye.